Hello, car enthusiasts. Welcome to our channel. We've prepared a very interesting video for you about the top 9 lost American cars that almost no one remembers. This video is sure to surprise you, so get comfortable and watch it until the end. Enjoy the show.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 9. The 1964 Studebaker Avanti II is a lesser-known continuation of the original Studebaker Avanti, which became a cult classic in its own right. Here's why the Avanti II is often forgotten. After Studebaker ceased automobile production in 1963, the Avanti II was produced by independent entrepreneurs who acquired the rights to the Avanti design. The new model, introduced in 1965, was essentially a continuation of the original Avanti, but it was no longer a product of a major automotive manufacturer. The Avanti II was produced by the newly formed Avanti Motor Corporation in South Bend, Indiana, in very limited numbers. The lack of large-scale production meant that it never gained the widespread visibility or popularity of mainstream cars. The Avanti II was marketed as a luxury sports coupe with a hand-built, bespoke nature, targeting a niche market. While it retained the sleek design and innovative features of the original Avanti, its appeal was limited to a small group of enthusiasts rather than the broader market. Unlike cars produced by major manufacturers, the Avanti II had minimal advertising and promotion. This contributed to its obscurity, as it didn't receive the same level of media attention or consumer awareness as other vehicles. The Avanti II closely resembled the original 1963 Studebaker Avanti, with only minor updates. While the car's design was innovative in the early 1960s, by the mid-1960s and beyond, it started to look dated compared to other, more modern vehicles. The Avanti II did not feature significant technological advancements or innovations that could have set it apart from its competitors. As other cars evolved in terms of performance, safety, and comfort, the Avanti II remained largely the same, which limited its appeal to new buyers. The Avanti II faced stiff competition from well-established luxury and sports car brands such as Cadillac, Lincoln, and Jaguar. These brands had more resources, a broader product lineup, and stronger dealer networks, making it difficult for the Avanti II to compete effectively. The Avanti II was positioned as a luxury vehicle, but its price tag was high for a car produced by an independent company. This further limited its market, as buyers could often get more features and brand prestige from other luxury vehicles at a similar price point. Without the backing of a major automotive company and with limited production numbers, the Avanti II never developed a strong legacy or widespread brand recognition. Over time, it faded into obscurity as other cars from the era became more iconic and remembered. Unlike the original Studebaker Avanti, which had a cultural impact due to its unique design and role in automotive history, the Avanti II didn't leave a significant mark on popular culture or the automotive industry. This lack of impact contributed to its forgotten status. The 1964 Studebaker Avanti II is often forgotten due to its production by independent companies after Studebaker ceased operations. With limited production, niche market appeal, and minimal design changes from the original Avanti, it struggled to gain widespread popularity. The competition from more established luxury brands and its high price tag further limited its appeal, leading it to fade into obscurity over time. Number 8. The 1960 Doto Adventurer is a prime example of a once-celebrated car that faded into obscurity due to the unfortunate timing of its release and the subsequent demise of its brand. The Doto brand was discontinued by Chrysler Corporation in late 1960, shortly after the 1960 Adventurer was released. This abrupt end to the brand meant that the Adventurer, along with other Doto models, did not benefit from ongoing development, marketing, or support, leading to its rapid disappearance from the public consciousness. The discontinuation of the Doto brand meant that its final models, including the Adventurer, were not widely celebrated or remembered. Unlike brands that continued production and maintained a presence in the market, Doto quickly became a relic of the past, with its cars fading from memory as time went on. By 1960, the Doto brand had already been struggling with declining sales and a loss of consumer interest. The Adventurer, despite being a high-end model, could not reverse this trend. As fewer people bought DeSotos, fewer were on the road, contributing to the brand's fading visibility and eventual obscurity. Within the Chrysler Corporation, other brands such as Dodge, Chrysler, and Plymouth were gaining more attention and investment. The DeSoto Adventurer, although a well-equipped and stylish car, found itself overshadowed by its corporate siblings, which offered similar or better features at competitive prices. The 1960 Adventurer featured the bold fin design that was popular in the late 1950s, but by 1960, automotive design trends were shifting towards more subdued and streamlined looks. This made the Adventurer appear somewhat dated by the time it was released, and it quickly fell out of fashion as the 1960s progressed. The Adventurer was part of Chrysler's forward-look design era, which was characterized by dramatic fins and futuristic styling. As the 1960s ushered in a new wave of automotive design, cars from this earlier period, including the Adventurer, began to be seen as relics of a bygone era rather than modern and relevant vehicles. The 1960 Adventurer was produced in limited numbers, partly due to the declining sales of the DeSoto brand. This limited production made it a rare car, but it also meant that fewer people experienced it, contributing to its rapid descent into obscurity. While the Adventurer is appreciated by classic car enthusiasts today, it never achieved the same level of collectability or iconic status as some other cars from the same era. Its rarity and the brief period of its production have kept it out of the spotlight, even among classic car collectors. Unlike some other cars of its time, the DeSoto Adventurer did not leave a significant mark on popular culture. It was not widely featured in movies, television, or other media, which could have helped preserve its memory in the public's mind. As newer, more advanced cars came onto the market in the 1960s, the Adventurer, along with the DeSoto brand, was largely forgotten. The lack of ongoing brand presence or iconic status meant that the Adventurer did not remain in the collective memory as other cars did. The 1960 DeSoto Adventurer is often forgotten due to the discontinuation of the DeSoto brand shortly after its release, leading to a lack of ongoing development, support, and consumer interest. As the DeSoto name quickly faded from the market, so did the memory of its final models, including the Adventurer. The car's bold design, characteristic of a bygone era, along with its limited production and minimal cultural impact, further contributed to its obscurity. Today, the Adventurer is remembered mainly by classic car enthusiasts as a relic of the final days of the DeSoto brand. Number 7. The 1964 Pontiac Tempest Le Mans is a classic car that has largely faded from memory due to its overshadowing by the more famous GTO, which was a performance variant based on the same platform. The 1964 Pontiac GTO, which was an option package on the Le Mans, became an iconic muscle car, often regarded as the first of its kind. Its success and popularity quickly overshadowed the base Le Mans and Tempest models, making them less memorable in comparison. The GTO's success tied the Le Mans name to high performance, but the original Tempest Le Mans was more of a mid-level trim rather than a true performance car. As a result, the Le Mans without the GTO package didn't leave as strong an impression. Over time, Pontiac shifted its focus towards the performance-oriented GTO, leaving the Tempest and Le Mans as less significant models. The emphasis on muscle cars in the late 1960s further pushed the earlier, more modest versions of the Le Mans into the background. As the Le Mans evolved and became a more distinct model in the Pontiac lineup, the early Tempest versions were increasingly seen as less significant predecessors rather than noteworthy in their own right. The 1964 Tempest Le Mans had a fairly standard design for the era, lacking the bold styling cues that would make it stand out. While it was a well-built car, it didn't have the striking appearance or innovative features that would make it particularly memorable. The standard Tempest Le Mans was equipped with relatively modest engine options, especially compared to the more powerful engines offered in the GTO. This made it less exciting for enthusiasts who were drawn to the performance aspects of the GTO. Unlike the GTO, which became a cultural icon, the Tempest Le Mans did not enjoy significant exposure in movies, television, or popular culture. This lack of media presence contributed to its fading from public memory. While the Tempest Le Mans had its appeal as a reliable and stylish car, it didn't capture the imagination of the public in the same way that more performance-oriented or uniquely designed cars of the era did. As the Le Mans name continued to be used in later, more distinctive models, the earlier versions were increasingly forgotten. The later models, especially those from the late 1960s and 1970s, featured more powerful engines and updated styling, making the 1964 model seem less significant in comparison. The rise of other Pontiac models like the Firebird and the continued success of the GTO meant that the 1964 Tempest Le Mans became overshadowed in Pontiac's history. It didn't have the lasting impact of these more famous models, leading to its relative obscurity. The 1964 Pontiac Tempest Le Mans is often forgotten because it was overshadowed by the introduction of the GTO, which became an iconic muscle car. The Le Mans' more modest origins as a mid-level trim didn't capture the same level of attention, and its standard design and engine options made it less memorable compared to the performance-focused models that followed. As the Le Mans evolved and other Pontiac models gained prominence, the early Tempest versions faded into obscurity, leaving them as lesser-known chapters in Pontiac's history. Number 6. The 1969 AMC Rebel is a car that has largely faded from memory, overshadowed by more distinctive and iconic models from American Motors Corporation, AMC. The AMC Javelin and AMX, both introduced in the late 1960s, became standout models for AMC, particularly in the performance and pony car segments. These cars captured the attention of enthusiasts and the public, making the more utilitarian Rebel less memorable in comparison. The Javelin and AMX were heavily marketed as performance-oriented vehicles, which were more in line with the trends of the late 1960s. The Rebel, positioned as a more practical, family-oriented car, didn't have the same appeal and thus didn't achieve the same level of recognition. The 1969 Rebel had a straightforward, functional design that lacked the bold styling cues seen in many of its competitors. While it was a reliable and practical car, its design didn't stand out in an era where dramatic and eye-catching designs were becoming the norm. The Rebel didn't offer many unique or innovative features that would make it memorable. It was seen as a competent but unremarkable vehicle, which contributed to its fading from public consciousness. The Rebel was positioned as a mid-range vehicle in AMC's lineup, which made it less exciting than the sportier or more luxurious models. It wasn't as affordable as the Rambler American or as performance-oriented as the Javelin and AMX, leading it to occupy a somewhat middle-of-the-road position. In a crowded market filled with strong offerings from the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, the Rebel struggled to make a lasting impact. Its competitors offered more distinctive styling, better performance, or more luxurious features, making the Rebel less appealing. The AMC Rebel didn't feature prominently in movies, television shows, or other media, which could have helped it maintain a place in public memory. Cars that achieve cultural significance are often remembered long after their production ends, but the Rebel didn't manage to achieve this. While the Rebel was a competent car, it didn't achieve the iconic status that some other AMC models did. Without a strong cultural or historical impact, it was easier for the Rebel to be forgotten as time went on. As AMC as a company began to struggle in the 1970s and eventually was absorbed by Chrysler in the 1980s, many of its models, including the Rebel, became less well-known. The decline of the brand contributed to the fading memory of the Rebel, as fewer people today remember AMC and its lineup. The 1969 AMC Rebel is often forgotten due to its overshadowing by more iconic AMC models like the Javelin and AMX. Its utilitarian design, mid-range market positioning, and lack of distinctive features made it less memorable in a competitive automotive market. The Rebel didn't leave a significant cultural impact, and as AMC itself faded from prominence, the Rebel became one of the many models that drifted into obscurity. The 1968 Mercury Cyclone GT is a classic muscle car that has largely been forgotten, despite its strong performance credentials. The Ford Mustang, introduced in 1964, quickly became a cultural icon and defined the pony car segment. Its immense popularity and widespread appeal overshadowed many other muscle cars of the era, including the Cyclone GT. The Mustang's success in both sales and motorsports made it the go-to choice for enthusiasts, pushing the Cyclone GT into the background. The late 1960s saw the rise of several iconic muscle cars, such as the Chevrolet Camaro, Dodge Charger, and Pontiac GTO. These cars had strong brand identities and extensive marketing campaigns, making them more prominent in the public eye than the Cyclone GT. The Mercury Cyclone GT was positioned as a performance-oriented model within Mercury's lineup, which itself was a mid-tier brand under Ford. While the Cyclone GT had impressive performance specs, it didn't have the same mass-market appeal as the more affordable and widely recognized Mustang. Mercury as a brand often struggled with its identity, positioned between the more economical Ford and the luxury-oriented Lincoln. The Cyclone GT, while a strong performer, didn't have the clear brand identity that helped other muscle cars stand out, which contributed to its obscurity. Unlike some of its competitors, the Cyclone GT didn't achieve significant exposure in movies, television, or pop culture. This lack of media presence meant it didn't become as ingrained in the public's memory as some other cars from the same era. While the Cyclone GT has its enthusiasts, it never reached the level of widespread acclaim that some other muscle cars did. Its appeal was more limited to dedicated fans of the Mercury brand or those who appreciated its unique performance characteristics. While the Cyclone GT had a sleek design, it was relatively conservative compared to some of the more flamboyant muscle cars of the time. This understated appearance may have contributed to it being overlooked by those seeking a more aggressive or distinctive look in their muscle car. Ford's marketing efforts were heavily concentrated on the Mustang, which left the Cyclone GT with less promotional support. Without a strong marketing push, it struggled to compete with the more heavily advertised and marketed vehicles from both Ford and other manufacturers. As the muscle car era continued, newer and more powerful models were introduced, further overshadowing the Cyclone GT. Even within Mercury's own lineup, later models like the Cougar took center stage, making the Cyclone GT seem less significant in retrospect. In the broader context of the muscle car era, the Cyclone GT is often seen as a footnote rather than a defining model. This has contributed to its relative obscurity compared to the more celebrated muscle cars of the late 1960s. The 1968 Mercury Cyclone GT is forgotten primarily because it was overshadowed by the Ford Mustang and other more iconic muscle cars of the era. Its positioning within Mercury's lineup, limited marketing support, and conservative styling made it less memorable than its competitors. While it had strong performance credentials, it didn't leave a lasting impact on the muscle car culture, leading it to fade into obscurity. The 1966 Dodge Polara is a full-size car that has largely been forgotten, and here's why it didn't leave a lasting impression. The 1966 Polara had a conservative and somewhat generic design that didn't stand out compared to other cars of the era. While it was a solid, well-built car, it lacked the distinctive styling cues that could have made it memorable. Its design was functional but not particularly exciting, which made it easy to overlook. Unlike some of its competitors, the Polara didn't introduce any groundbreaking features or technology. It was a reliable car, but without any standout innovations, it didn't capture the public's attention in the way that more cutting-edge models did. The mid-1960s saw the rise of the Dodge Charger, which became one of the most iconic muscle cars of all time. The Charger's aggressive styling, powerful performance, and cultural impact far outshone the Polara. As the Charger became the face of Dodge's performance lineup, the Polara was left in its shadow. The Dodge lineup in the 1960s included several models that were more distinctive or had more focused branding, such as the Coronet and the Dart. These cars either catered to specific market segments or had more memorable designs, further pushing the Polara into obscurity. The Polara was positioned as a full-size car in a market segment that was becoming increasingly competitive. Many other full-size cars from both Chrysler's brands and competitors like Ford and GM had more memorable designs, better performance options, or more luxurious features. In such a crowded field, the Polara didn't offer enough to set itself apart. The Polara was largely marketed as a family car, which, while practical, didn't generate the same excitement as sportier or more luxurious models. Its appeal was more utilitarian, which didn't lend itself to long-term recognition or nostalgia. The Polara didn't have a significant presence in movies, television, or other forms of media, which could have helped keep it in the public's memory. Cars that become iconic often do so because of their appearances in popular culture, but the Polara never achieved this level of exposure. While the Polara had its fans, it never developed the strong enthusiast following that some other Dodge models did. Without a passionate community to keep its legacy alive, the Polara faded into the background. As Dodge shifted its focus more towards performance cars in the late 1960s and 1970s, models like the Polara, which didn't fit this new image, were gradually phased out or forgotten. The Polara didn't align with the brand's evolving identity, which contributed to its fading from memory. In the years following the Polara, Dodge introduced newer models that better captured the market's attention. These newer cars made the Polara seem even more dated and less relevant, hastening its journey into obscurity. The 1966 Dodge Polara is forgotten largely because it didn't stand out in any particular way. Its generic design, lack of unique features, and positioning as a full-size family car made it easy to overlook in a market filled with more exciting and iconic Dodge models like the Charger. The Polara's minimal cultural impact, combined with Dodge's shift towards performance-oriented vehicles, further contributed to its decline into obscurity. Number 3, the 1963 Rambler. Classic 770 is a car that has largely faded from memory, and here's why it didn't leave a lasting impression. The Rambler brand was known for producing practical, reliable, and economical vehicles, and the classic 770 was no exception. However, in the early 1960s, the automotive market was increasingly leaning towards cars that offered more in terms of style, performance, and luxury. The classic 770's conservative design and focus on practicality made it less exciting compared to flashier models from other manufacturers. The 1963 Rambler Classic 770 featured a straightforward, boxy design that was functional but lacked the visual appeal of more dynamic and stylish cars of the era. Its appearance was solid and unpretentious, which suited its role as a dependable family car, but didn't help it stand out in a crowded market. The early 1960s saw the dominance of the big three American automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, which were producing increasingly innovative and attractive vehicles. Cars like the Ford Galaxy, Chevrolet Impala, and Dodge Dart were not only more stylish but also offered a wider range of engine options and features, making them more appealing to a broader audience. The Rambler Classic 770, by contrast, didn't offer the same level of excitement or choice. While the Classic 770 was available with a V8 engine, it was still positioned as a practical, no-frills car rather than a performance-oriented model. As the muscle car era was beginning to take shape, cars with more powerful engines and sportier designs were capturing the public's imagination, leaving the Rambler Classic 770 as a more mundane choice. Rambler was a brand known for sensible and economical cars, but as the 1960s progressed, consumer taste began shifting towards more powerful, stylish, and luxurious vehicles. The Rambler brand struggled to adapt to these changing preferences, and the Classic 770, while a solid car, didn't fit with the emerging trends that were defining the decade. By the mid-1960s, Rambler's parent company, American Motors Corporation, AMC, began to shift its focus towards more competitive and distinctive models, like the AMX and the Javelin. These cars were designed to appeal to the growing performance and youth markets, further sidelining the Rambler Classic 770 as a relic of an earlier, more conservative era. Unlike some of its competitors, the Rambler Classic 770 didn't gain significant exposure in popular media, such as movies or television. This lack of cultural presence meant it didn't become ingrained in the public's memory as some other cars did. While the Classic 770 was a reliable and practical car, it didn't develop a strong enthusiast following. Cars that remain memorable often do so because they have a dedicated base of fans who keep their legacy alive. But the Classic 770 didn't inspire this kind of passion. As car design evolved rapidly through the 1960s and 1970s, the Rambler Classic 770's conservative styling and focus on practicality became increasingly outdated. Newer models from various automakers offered more in terms of performance, technology, and design, making the classic 770 seem old-fashioned. In the late 1960s, AMC began phasing out the Rambler name in favor of a stronger focus on its own brand identity. This shift further contributed to the Rambler Classic 770's fade into obscurity as the Rambler brand itself disappeared from the market. The 1963 Rambler Classic 770 is forgotten, primarily because it was a practical, no-frills car that didn't have the flair or innovation to stand out in an increasingly competitive market. Its conservative design, lack of performance options, and positioning within the declining Rambler brand made it less memorable compared to more stylish and exciting cars of the era. As consumer tastes shifted and the Rambler brand faded, the classic 770 became a relic of a bygone era, largely forgotten in the annals of automotive history. Number 2, the 1967 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser is a classic station wagon known for its distinctive glass roof panels. However, it has largely faded from memory for several reasons. During the late 1960s, Oldsmobile produced several models that were more prominent in the public eye, such as the Cutlass and 442. These models had a stronger performance and luxury appeal, overshadowing the Vista Cruiser, which was more of a niche vehicle within Oldsmobile's lineup. The Vista Cruiser competed with other station wagons that had more mainstream appeal or innovative features. For example, the Ford Country Squire and the Chevrolet Impala wagon were more popular and widely recognized, making the Vista Cruiser less memorable by comparison. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, consumer preferences were shifting away from large station wagons towards more compact cars and SUVs. The Vista Cruiser, despite its distinctive design, was part of a segment that was gradually losing favor with buyers who were looking for more versatile or stylish options. Station wagons in general often faced a stigma as being less exciting compared to sedans or sports cars. The Vista Cruiser, while unique, didn't escape this perception and was sometimes seen as a more utilitarian vehicle rather than a desirable collector's item. While the glass roof panels were a distinctive feature, they were also polarizing. Some buyers appreciated the unique look and added light, while others found the design unconventional or impractical. This mixed reception could have contributed to the Vista Cruiser's limited appeal and its subsequent obscurity. Beyond the glass roof, the Vista Cruiser's overall design was fairly traditional for a station wagon of its time. It didn't push the boundaries of automotive design beyond its roof panels, making it less memorable compared to more radically styled vehicles. The Vista Cruiser was produced for several years, but the model's prominence was somewhat fleeting. As Oldsmobile introduced new models and updated designs, the Vista Cruiser's unique features became less of a focus, leading to its decline in popularity. Over time, the Vista Cruiser was updated and modified, which sometimes diluted the distinctiveness of its original design. As newer versions were introduced, the original 1967 model's unique features were overshadowed by other updates and changes. The Vista Cruiser didn't achieve significant cultural exposure in movies, television, or other media. This lack of media presence meant that it didn't become as ingrained in popular culture as some other cars of the era. While some car enthusiasts appreciate the Vista Cruiser, it never developed a strong, widespread following. Cars that remain memorable often have passionate communities of fans, but the Vista Cruiser didn't capture the same level of enthusiasm or recognition. The 1967 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser is largely forgotten because it was overshadowed by more popular Oldsmobile models and competing station wagons of the era. Its distinctive glass roof panels, while unique, didn't sufficiently differentiate it from other vehicles in a segment that was losing favor with consumers. Combined with changing consumer preferences, limited cultural impact, and the evolution of automotive design, the Vista Cruiser faded from prominence, becoming a less memorable entry in Oldsmobile's lineup. Number 1. The 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport, while an important part of Buick's muscle car history, has largely faded from memory for several reasons. The 1960s were a golden era for muscle cars, and the Buick Skylark Grand Sport faced stiff competition from more famous GM models like the Pontiac GTO and Chevrolet Chevelle SS. These models had a stronger market presence and more aggressive marketing, which overshadowed the Skylark Grand Sport. While the Skylark Grand Sport offered strong performance, it didn't quite reach the same level of power or recognition as its rivals. For example, the GTO and Chevelle SS had more extensive aftermarket support and were more widely known for their performance capabilities. Buick was traditionally known for its luxury and comfort rather than performance. The Skylark Grand Sport, while a muscle car, was positioned within a brand that was more associated with a mature, refined image. This positioning may have contributed to it being overshadowed by brands with a stronger, performance-oriented reputation. The Skylark Grand Sport was part of the Skylark lineup, which was known for its more conservative styling compared to the more aggressive and eye-catching designs of other muscle cars. This made it less appealing to buyers looking for a standout, high-performance vehicle. The Skylark Grand Sport did not receive the same level of aggressive marketing and promotion as its more famous GM counterparts. The GTO, for instance, was heavily promoted and had a strong racing presence, which helped cement its status as an iconic muscle car. The Grand Sport's exposure in media and popular culture was limited compared to the GTO and other muscle cars. Cars that gain lasting fame often have strong media representation and cultural references, which the Skylark Grand Sport lacked. While the Skylark Grand Sport was a successful model, it didn't achieve the high production numbers of some of its competitors. Limited production numbers can sometimes contribute to a vehicle being forgotten over time. Over the years, Buick's focus shifted, and the Skylark Grand Sport was eventually phased out. The changing focus of the brand and the evolution of the muscle car market meant that the Grand Sport's legacy was somewhat diluted. The Skylark Grand Sport has a dedicated group of enthusiasts, but it never developed the same level of passionate following as some other muscle cars. Enthusiast communities play a significant role in keeping a car's legacy alive, and the Grand Sport's following, while appreciative, was not as large or vocal as those of other muscle cars. The 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport is largely forgotten because it was overshadowed by more iconic muscle cars from GM like the Pontiac GTO and Chevrolet Chevelle SS. Despite its strong performance, it struggled with a less aggressive marketing approach, limited exposure, and a brand image that was more associated with luxury than performance. The Skylark Grand Sport's legacy is also affected by its production numbers and the changing focus of Buick, which contributed to its diminished presence in automotive history.